Huh?
All right, let's call our South Kingstown School Building Committee to order. It is 4:05 on September 7th, 2023. We'll do a roll call. Luke Murray.
Here.
Dave Palizzetti.
Here.
Brian Sylvia.
Here.
Bob Littlefield.
Here.
Terry Lynch.
Here.
And Chip McGarr.
Here.
Just a quick intro. We have Bob Littlefield is our new superintendent, and Terry Lynch is going to be our representative from the school district who is most familiar with basically all of our buildings and all of our, you've been with the district for an extensive period of time and you're very familiar with the ins and outs. So let's see, review and discussion and or action regarding public correspondence. I have not received any, so there goes that. And as far as chairperson's general correspondence and ongoing activities report, I don't have anything at the moment outside of what is on the agenda to discuss, except for introducing our two new members, which I've already done. And so I'm going to move on to item number 5 and call for nominations and a vote for school building committee secretary, please. Because currently I am chair and secretary. So I would love somebody to either nominate a fellow member or step up themselves, please. Brian Mahoney, and he is our vice chair. So he's already filled the spot.
And Jim's not here.
And Mr. Manny's not here either. I don't see him, the note-taking type. I was going to say, I have 50 minutes because I'm not moving forward until this role gets filled because I'm a little tired. Who do we have?
Classroom instruction.
I nominate Brian Sylvia for secretary.
We'll quickly second that.
Excellent. So motion by Luke, second by Dave. All in favor of Brian Sylvia being our secretary?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Brian, you're welcome to oppose it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Please, thank you. And we all work together to make sure that everything gets taken care of on that. So I appreciate that. Yeah. And so we will now quickly move on to item 6, review, discuss, and recommend action on our high school budget. Luke, are we passing it over to you or are we passing it over to Mr. Spiegel?
I'll give a brief summary and then we can certainly, we're bringing this to the committee so they're aware. Chris can get into the details, but in transparency, he brought this issue to the attention of Kate and myself about a week and a half ago. Part of the OPM's mandate is to review the cost estimates and look at what has been done to date. And they did that. They brought some concerns to our attention, which he'll go over. And it's something that the committee needs to kind of synthesize because we're pretty far along in the process of moving towards a bond referendum at this time. A lot of legwork has been done. So I'll leave it there and let Chris kind of take the helm, and then we can have a discussion to follow. But just pay attention to the information and be certain to ask questions. He's expecting it. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Spiegel with Left Field. Before you today, we have a very short presentation. I understand that there might be a football game or something that's going on a little bit later today that everyone needs to get to, so I wanted to keep it as short and as simple as possible. As Luke mentioned, part of our mandate as the owner's project manager is to review everything that you guys have done to date in terms of the budget, your cost estimate, and to make sure that it aligns with what we're seeing in the industry. So for the agenda today, we'll talk about the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. We'll briefly go over the estimate analysis. We'll talk about your adjusted tax impact, questions and open discussion, and then next steps and a motion to advance. So why do we do this due diligence analysis? Well, it's to ensure that your program budget contains all costs, to compare individual construction components against what we're seeing in the industry due to our historical database of what projects are really costing right now for all sorts of categories, protect the owner from substantial scope reduction, and to discover potential opportunities for cost savings. But, in a much larger sense, we do this because we don't want to end up in a situation where the project is underfunded and that we've already made a commitment to the constituents and to the taxpayers of South Kingstown, and now we have to basically go back and reassess what we're doing and how we can deliver that project and deliver everything that was promised. So as part of that, these are a few headlines. I don't want to spend too long on it, but as you can see, it's happening all around the state, and what we're doing here is we're trying to get out ahead of it and make sure that you guys have the program budget in place for the work that you want to do. So the estimate on your left is from PM&C. PM&C is the third-party cost estimator that was used by Studio Jade for this project. Having a third-party cost estimator is a requirement of the Rhode Island Department of Education School Building Authority for a Stage 2 submission. As you can see, that the estimate that was prepared did come in at approximately $126,543,000. What Left Field did is we looked at that estimate and for a number of things. A, what didn't it include, and what numbers do we think need to be adjusted? So everything that you see in green here has either been adjusted or it's been added because we, the OPM, know that you are going to incur these costs. However, they were not accounted for in the PM&C estimate. So as you can see, there's a difference here, 126 with PM&C, and after Left Field has done our analysis and drove into the numbers, we're looking at a project cost at $151,827. That being said, this 151 number is absolutely everything. It is the athletic complex, it is the auditorium, it is a new high school, it is as this project was developed. It meets all of your programming requirements. Obviously, $150 million is a lot more than $125 million. And currently we're on track to go out for a $125 million bond. Looking at a tax impact about what the difference might be, originally at $125 million, and this is what was presented to the town council on March 2nd of 23, you were looking at a total cost at $184 million. And now at a $150 million bond, you're looking at a total cost of $215 million. So what does that do for the average annual taxpayer? So at $150 million, you're looking at a 393 hit over 5 years. The delta between that and $125 million is $113 million. But we think the most impactful, and for residents that are going to be looking at this and seeing how does it work into their own personal budget as a constituent, as a taxpayer here in South Kingstown, you're looking at a delta of $22.60 per month if this bond was to increase to $150 million. I know I've gone through this very quickly. I know that there's lots of questions. I'd be happy to discuss absolutely any part of this, but I really just wanted to lay out the facts to you guys, is that the current project that you guys have designed, that you guys have envisioned, that you've been talking about with the community, cannot be built for $125 million. In our opinion, it cannot be built for $125 million. And at this point, we need to reassess and to see how do we want to move forward with this project.
So I'm just going to start off basically saying thank you, and I'm glad we're getting ahead of it. There's been a lot of obvious discussion around construction costs, and it's quite obvious, we're very aware of what's been happening in the industry around us by watching the other communities that you've pointed out. That said, I'd like to open it up to the full board to bring their share of questions, comments, and concerns forward. And hopefully, Chris can answer some questions, and also if Jim and Phil want to join, they can also do some clarifying and answering. Yeah, please come to the table and you can share mics. So, does anybody want to start out with a question, comment, or concern?
My first question would be to hear from Studio Jade, so. Is that, I mean, you're basically saying there's things that they missed, but you're saying every other number that they had was fine? Like their cost per square foot, all those things are fine?
We believe that the $835 a square foot that was calculated out, when you calculate the PM&C estimate, we believe that's fair for this current market value, at $835.
Okay, so, I don't know, Phil.
Sure. So, thank you. So, in one of our presentations, I think where we have presented our soft cost model, ran the project up to about maybe 135-ish. And at that point, we thought we were within striking distance. The OPM did a great job of sort of looking through those soft costs and seeing, well, what RIDE prescribes as soft cost, this is a little light, this is a little light, this is a little light. Then they want to add a contingency, which I would support as well. Once you do that, you very quickly can go from the 135 to the 150. So a couple things. One, we knew we underestimated the demolition, which was corrected in this estimate. So that captured a couple $1 million there as well. And in addition to a couple more soft costs that are probably prudent to carry now, that added to the money and got us up to the 150. So obviously, a 125 bond is not within striking distance of what potentially could be a $150 million project. As you've seen in some of the neighboring communities, there is $20-25 million shortfalls that we are at a point now where we can pivot, position South Kingstown properly, to then move forward with the project that they want. You could deliver a project that is smaller, but it will not have the things that we have been promoting to the community, not the things that we've heard from CHIP that the school community needs. So I am disappointed and a little embarrassed to be here today, but understand that we need to have a transparent and truthful conversation. If 125 is not enough to give South Kingstown what they want, then now's the time to halt, reposition, and assign a value that would allow us to move forward with a project that does meet the needs. So, in short, the $135,000 that we came up with is not going to be enough. It's $150 million. And I would support the work that Left Field did in sort of developing some of those other soft costs, correcting the demolition costs to generate the $150 million project budget. The last thing I want to say is, overall, in terms of costs, you hear a lot about escalation in supply chain, and that is still a part of it, but not as big as what I think is happening now. And what is actually happening now is we have the convergence of a couple major things here. One is the expiration of ESSER 3 funds, which is going to be September of 2024. There is a lot of money still pumping into the market right now that is set to expire, and that money needs to be spent and encumbered. The second is the extension by the legislature of the incentives and the timeline is great. So communities that were on the edge are now also jumping in. So you have many, many major projects that are now starting to come online in Rhode Island. The third thing is, there is, in my opinion, an overall lack of competition in Rhode Island for major subcontracting, and those employers are recognizing that there's only so much workforce that they have, that their wages need to increase, that materials are increasing and the costs are coming back to the owner. So there is, yes, the supply chain issue still, but I do believe the convergence of three major things that we certainly did not anticipate when we were developing the estimate. The last thing I'll say is Left Field and I on other projects together and separately are actively estimating projects, opening bids on projects, and sometimes it's hard to make a connection between bids that we receive on bid day and some of the estimates that were presented previously. Some of the bids are lower, some of the bids are higher. So all of this comes back to South Kingstown has spent years developing what they feel is the right project, the biggest project ever to come down the pike for them. And we have seen obstacles ahead of us. And we have an obligation to alert you to them and have a discussion so that we can pivot accordingly.
Just to add on to that as well, just because we are in a tight construction market right now does not mean that prices are going to go substantially down in the future. This is still the right time to do this project because of the reimbursement rate, because of the bonus points that you're doing. Right here is forecast data. This is data that shows that construction prices are going to continue to keep climbing in the future. You still, even at $150 million, the town of South Kingstown and the South Kingstown School Department gets the most value doing their project under the current parameters which the project is set forth. So getting into construction, getting this project bid out, awarded prior to the bonus points expiring, it's still the right path forward in order to make sure that we're maximizing the value and maximizing our reimbursement.
I'll have a few questions that likely that town council would ask. One of them is, we currently are on track to have a bond referendum. Can you get a project for 125? And if so, what does that even look like?
Can you get a project for 125? Yes, but it's going to be severely, severely limited. It's going to be, I would defer to the architect. You're looking at the cost per square foot you're seeing like 105,000 square foot building probably, maybe 100,000 square foot building. The programming requirements call for 140,000 square foot building. So you'd be cost containing over 30,000 square feet. That is a lot of educational space, CTE space, a lot of the things that you guys have been talking about that are so important that would have to get removed from this project. I really don't see a path forward at $125 million. I have to be honest. We do not see a path forward for a high school, for the amount of students that you have, with the spaces that you want at $125 million.
So I know we've had some discussions on this. So essentially, $125 million project wouldn't have an athletic facility,
It will not.
no expanded auditorium,
Nope.
significantly reduced square footage.
Significantly reduced square footage, significantly decreased programming spaces.
This is where I turn to Phil, the architect, and say, is it reasonable to even look at a program at that scale of project?
I'd say, based on the meetings that we had with Chip, when we went through the program, we were already trying to reduce the building. I believe, according to the RIDE guidelines, they'd be eligible for reimbursement up to about 156,000 square feet. We were coming in less than that. We wanted to target 145. I think we landed at about 150. Could we get to 145 and satisfy Chip's program and give you the schools that you're expecting? Yes. I don't think we could go much below 140,000 square feet and be able to satisfy the programmatic needs.
What'd you say, Jim?
Can you hear me? Okay.
He just made the point that it was 140, the 150 was for 140,000 square foot building. Does anybody have any other comments, questions, currently. Go ahead, Dave.
I don't know where to start because this is all new to me. So if we can't build it for 125, we've already talked about, we've already done the legislation to go forward with a $125 million bond. So where does the other 25 million come from? Doesn't necessarily have to be from a bond. And I think if we do go for a bond, we have to delay the vote, and that's going to cause some angst in the community. So where, and I don't know who to look at, where do we find some pay down early on to reduce the capital expenses? Where do we know, I mean, I'm shotgunning you right now. We talked about RIDE giving a higher reimbursement value than they originally had planned in terms of dollars per square foot. So those are the kind of the metrics, because I think it's going to fall on the town council and probably on our finance folks to figure out what the true impact to the taxpayer is. Because if RIDE does reimburse more, and there is some support directly from the schools or directly from the town in terms of a down payment, then we don't necessarily have to go back to the taxpayers and tell them that your tax rate's going to go crazy. Because reading the tea leaves, you've got a 3-2 town council vote to get a 150 bond, probably 5-0 on the school, but there's going to be a whole lot of people in this town that aren't going to support $150 million.
So I'll weigh in on this because Jim's not here. And it's a good segue because I was notified earlier of this because Chris advised us and Jim, said we have an issue. One of the first actions I did was notify Brian and say, we need to look at what our options are. What's the tools in the tool basket to be able to not have to pivot on the bond? Because it is disruptive, right? The benefit now is, and I thank Chris and the left field team for bringing it to our attention now, is that we're still early in the bond process. We were literally meeting with the Board of Canvassers to set up for the referendum. And we need to know, because we had already filed the paperwork with the state. So are there ways to get out from under this? So Brian and I spoke. One option is to take what's called the pay-go money, the upfront money that RIDE gives you, and instead of applying it to the debt, to put it on top of the project. Our legislation was written that we have to apply it to the debt. So that option is off the table. So in theory, we could have taken $9 million and put it on top of the 125 and maybe got a project. It still would have been a reduced project based on discussions with Chris and Phil and others, but it was an option. That option is not available to us. Some communities, I did follow up with Mario Carino, some communities have it written, the legislation written, so that pay-go could be put on top of. But we never calculated it that way. We also never presented to the town council those scenarios. Those numbers were with the pay-go applied to the debt. So we'd still have to go back to council and say the numbers have changed, right, even if we want to apply that pay-go. What other options do we have? Not many. We do not have $25 million sitting aside to apply to a project. And the difficulty is a lot of we as a building committee, right, we're advisory. We've already done reductions. We've already done a responsible due diligence to reduce the footprint, cost contain some of the components. So we don't have a lot of other cost containment options. We're already, based on what Phil just told you, we're already kind of at minimum square footages. So it's not like we overbuilt the program. Now, we did put into the stage 2 for RIDE reimbursement a higher number, 150,000 plus square feet. But because we're formula driven on the reimbursement, the way RIDE looks at it, it's on a square foot basis. So it's what, $589 a square foot with the fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. So we're about $101 million that'll be eligible for reimbursement. And we anticipated another 11-ish million eligible for reimbursement for the fields. Now we can't even get the building for the 125. So we're still capped at 101 for the eligible reimbursement amount, and we can't get the building for 125. So it's a problem. And we've spitballed back and forth looking at options. We just don't have a lot of tools in the tool basket right now. So, but, the truth is, and you said it, this has to go to council. It is fully under the purview of town council to determine if they want to proceed with this. If so, are they willing to set that number at the 150? I think we've heard clearly 125 is not going to work for this project. We had a float going down Main Street, what this would look like. I think it would be a disservice to the community to overpromise something and then come back with an inferior product. That's not what this building committee has been about. It's been about transparency and putting all cards on the table. So that's why we wanted to have this conversation. We could have hidden under a rock. We could have said, you know what, let's just roll because it's the least disruptive at this point. But we would have been exactly where Newport is and other communities are right now, trying to cost contain, and it would have been extremely disruptive a year or two from now. So bottom line it, I think our only option at this point is, one, determine if town council does indeed want to put the brakes on, which is, it's already on the agenda because we had to get a placeholder on the agenda for Monday night with the upcoming meeting. That was posted today. We are on the agenda to present a very basic presentation to say, hey, listen, this project's scope hasn't changed, the price has changed, right? And it's based on responsible due diligence. Do you want to move forward? Because if you want to put the brakes on, now is the time. Because we don't want to expend a ton of town resources on a referendum. We also don't want to be telling the public that this is coming and then another month from now telling them the brakes are on. We're still very early. Some people don't even know there's a referendum even being planned. Many haven't been following the process. We typically had 2 or 3 people at this meeting, right? But it's going to increase as the referendum gets closer. The next question to be answered by the town council, which I think is at a separate meeting than Monday night. I think Monday's really about, do we want to go full bore, straightforward, and ignore kind of the information we're seeing here, or put the brakes on? Once that decision made, then I think a separate meeting is appropriate to come out and look at the numbers a little bit more in depth, answer questions of the council more in depth, and determine what the town council's will is. If they want to move to the 150 and get the whole project, if a discussion ensues about what the middle ground is, that is out of the purview of this building committee. Does anybody have any questions?
Just to follow up on what Luke said, we didn't bring these numbers to you to say the sky is falling. That's not our role. Our role is to perform our due diligence, but it's also to protect you guys from getting into a situation which is happening in other communities in Rhode Island where they went out for a bond, they were told it wasn't enough, they still went out for it, and now their projects have just completely stopped. And they have the chance of losing out on bonus points because they won't have a contractor on board because the designs are nowhere near where they need to be. So if we got out ahead of this we're in a good place right now without a bond having been issued. Now is the right time. If we're going to pivot, it is now.
Chris, just a question. So how long would you say that these numbers are good for?
Well, we've factored in escalation into our project budget. That's something that wasn't in the current one. So our escalation number right now, the way that we've calculated, assumes that the vote will be delayed, a referendum will be delayed until sometime in the spring, and that construction will start up thereafter. So we've factored in case the town does want to go this route, that we factor that into our cost already.
But so if I'm understanding it correctly, so it's not indefinite though. Like in other words, bonuses aside, if we were to delay even further than that, then the cost could escalate beyond that number.
So it absolutely will, and that's
what I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's what this. I don't want there to be a misconception that because there's a lot of work that prices are going to automatically start dropping across the board. We are never going to have pricing what it was pre-COVID. It will not happen for a lot of the reasons that Phil stated. Prices is going to continue to go up. Will it continue to jump at the rate it's gone over the past few years? Probably not. But pricing was never going to go back to pre-levels. Just because maybe we hear in the news that lumber prices have fallen or something like that, it does not impact a project like this of this scale.
So there's a window to do it for 151 million, and just like there's a window with the bonuses, and after that, the bonuses could very well disappear, and the costs will continue to skyrocket.
So if you were to wait 2 years, the project will cost more money, and you'll be reimbursed less.
Okay, thank you.
So Chris, you're saying you escalated to the midpoint of construction based on this?
Yes.
So, I guess it's a question for Brian. I don't know what the debt service is annually on the extra $25 million. Is that something that between the town and the school budget, they can absorb that debt service? Because I know that the school is required to be flat funded, but is expecting decreases in enrollment. We're gonna get that question from the community, so
Yep.
I'm gonna put it out there. If there's enrollment decrease, and there's savings, and they're flat funded, is there a delta there that could cover at least some of the debt service? Or a significant enough amount to make it worthwhile to even discuss?
In terms of the school population, I would have to defer that to the council and the school committee. I don't, that's between those boards to have those conversations. In terms of the costs on the bond itself, going up to 150, the actual difference, annual difference, you're looking at approximately $2 million annually.
So we gotta find $2 million in the budget somewhere.
The annual debt service of the $150 million bond would be about $2 million up.
It's the entire town budget, including the schools.
All in with the, all in is 105 million this year?
So you're at 2%. Okay.
Yeah,
Not suggesting, I'm just collecting data.
yeah,
Believe me, all the questions, they're gonna be asked either here, Monday night, or in town. So they just need to be asked, so I appreciate it.
yeah, it's a good, fair question. It's likely to come up. As we've said before, you know, it's not really our job to get into the weeds on that. I will say mechanically, the mechanics of school committees and Title 16 and how that works versus town budget, you know, the town provides an allocation to them. So you can certainly level fund and meet the maintenance of effort, but trying to mandate that they pull money back, there's no mechanism to do that. So it's very difficult. You know, I know people say, well, we should get it from the schools. The way the system is built on transferring funds to the schools doesn't really allow that. And this is it's a town project. It is funded through bonds that are initiated by the town. So the only really mechanism available is to potentially level the school budget for the duration of the project, or however they see fit, and choose to reallocate whatever dollars to the project, however that would work. But it's difficult mechanically. It's no easy answer.
Yeah, how many years have you been level funded?
4.
for the school?
So it's 3 years of level funding. So we received the flat fund the first year, and then 3 years after that.
Is the state done with their reductions in state aid, or are we fully implemented?
I can't answer that off the top of my head. I'm not sure, Bob, if you can. But what I do know is that with kind of going away from that topic a little bit, just with this board in particular, it is disappointing for us as a board to hear, obviously. I will say, I would be remiss if I didn't say, going forward, this board at the moment has a very high level of trust within the community, and thus why I'm glad we're bringing this out now, so that we can maintain that. We did recommend the 150 out of the gate for a much larger scope, right? So we recommended the 150, but it was inclusive of elementary schools and other projects, but also keeping in mind that even with the high school, what we were suggesting at 125, it was pretty obvious that we felt even at that point that number was too low. Again, it falls at the feet of the council to do with what they will, right? And all we can do is continue to ask the questions and give as much information as possible, and move forward from there, and let the town and our school department kind of
I agree. I mean, Luke,
help guide
said
us.
it's not our problem to solve. I'm just asking questions.
No, for
It's gonna
sure.
come up on Monday.
Oh, for sure.
Ask, how much, if we level funded the school, what is the savings expected annually, and what could that do to the increase in the budget?
Yep.
Fair.
I will put money on the table.
Yep.
That question will be asked almost verbatim
It'll be asked, right? It's probably being asked at home right now
by a lot of people.
by a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
thank you.
True.
I just hope to prepare for it. So,
for sure.
very sad news for me. I knew we were close at 135, but I was very comfortable at 135 because I do expect some more reimbursement from the state because they're going to increase that square footage value. Mario told us so, but he's not going to increase it enough for 151. So, Yeah, I'm very disappointed. I was very excited about this and would like to see it go forward, but I'm not sure there's an appetite in this community for a $150 million bond.
Well, so and the other piece, if we move forward with the 125, I don't, on that same tone, I don't think there's an appetite in the community for high school only with no athletic facilities and no extended auditorium. I mean, Chris, do you mind going back to that other?
I don't think we should, I agree, I don't think we should separate them. And
Right, and so if we look at, is some of the things in green, but if we look at the Curtis Quarter Field being 11, I think at one point it was probably projected, I think it was like at 6.
that feels high. You guys are,
Well, and
you're comfortable with that number? 11 just seems really
And I
high.
think that's something that number could probably be played with, where we do, that's like the kind of the dream solution, and if we, you can pare it down, but again, it's not coming down much more than 5 more, you know what I mean?
The
It's
number's
still,
not close, but I just
correct.
think it felt really
Yeah.
like a big number.
so I don't know if Chris
When,
wanted.
when the 135 was presented, I looked at that and said, it seems kind of high there.
Does anybody else have any input, insight, questions they would like to throw out there?
I do want to just make a point to Chip and Dave. Your concern about escalation is heard, and obviously you talked about it being the midpoint of the project, and we did talk about that. Just so everyone knows, I did make a call to Mario Carino and did have a good conversation with him. Obviously, the state's perspective is always, let's follow the path of least disruption, and hey, maybe you just go forward with the 125. And my words to him is, I don't think that's acceptable. That's kind of duping the community into thinking that we have a project here, and we don't. The state is very apt to give out the money. They want to do that. My feeling is they want to give out more money than raise the reimbursement rates, right? So that was a non-starter, but he was helpful in talking us through. One potential tool in the tool basket is that PAYGO. Just so you know, if you go back to the numbers, the 150 versus the 125, the original 125 as projected had the PAYGO paying down some of the debt. This number is a little bit higher because we're keeping the PAYGO for flexibility purposes out of the base. So it'd be 150 bond. We could use potentially, if the legislature is written as such, some of that PAYGO as sort of an outside contingency, if needed, to forward to the project. So let's say the project comes in at 153 or 154. We could apply some of the PAYGO, the upfront money that RIDE gives us, to the project, and then take the rest and pay down the bond. Our ideal circumstances, the project's under 150, we apply all the PAYGO down to pay the debt. We don't want to incur any more debt and any more taxpayer burden than we need to. But this strategy, unlike the previous strategy, it gives us a little bit more wiggle room for things like escalation because we are in an uncertain environment. And Chris can tell you that, and Jim can tell you that from left field. They deal with it every day. So we have to be dealing with that reality. We definitely do not want to be back here. That's for sure. I don't think any of us want to sit around this table again during a project saying we have a foundation in the ground and prices have gone up again. So,
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. And then, like you said, this 150 number, the way we have calculated the average annual taxpayer cost, that does include the PAYGO. If you guys were not to use the PAYGO, it might shift a little, positively. But, we wanted to make sure that we had the highest number in the presentation we were giving you tonight.
If we get the state to cover our transportation costs, which are in excess of every other community in the town, and that would probably cover half of that $25 million annual debt. But our legislatures haven't helped us on that, despite the wonderful 17% return we get on our reimbursement. So that's a problem for Bob. What is our annual? It's about $2 million for transportation a year.
Oh my.
Yeah.
No, much
5?
significantly higher.
Five?
It's
No
close to-
comment.
It's
Yeah. So
it's
I mean,
closer to 6.
I guess what is the delta between us and the next highest community? And it's probably
About 4 million.
how much
About 4 million is the delta.
is the
I
delta?
think we're about closer to 4, yeah.
Wow. I know
Yes.
they're out of session till January, but that would be
Yes,
that would be,
correct. I will say that a couple of our school committee members have gone with our representatives at the State House multiple times, as have hordes of our community members have gone up. So that's a battle that's just constantly being being fought for sure.
Town council could push forward as a,
Be nice.
Brian, do you know how much the district currently spends on out-of-district tuition?
I do not know.
I think it was it upwards of 5 million?
I don't know if we're at 5, but it's
It's a
over 2.
Yeah, it's a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, it's a little less than 5 in this past year. This past year was one of the things that came in under budget.
Okay. Yeah, so we're definitely over 2 million. Yeah, yeah. A little over 4 is what Superintendent Littlefield's saying. Going
it's
for,
gonna be a straight up and down fairness issue.
can you put
And
that
I
on?
would put,
Can you
and
turn it on?
I believe it is, and I would point out that the longer this project goes unbuilt, the greater the out-of-district tuition costs are going to happen.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where I was, reason why I was asking that question, because, at a $125 million project that you're trying to cost contain, I don't see any of those students coming back. At a $150 million project that gets everything you want, I do see your retention rate and your matriculation from elementary schools to the high school as being much higher.
Chris, because money, like having an estimate might be helpful to this exact conversation, are there any, is there a way to look at what some other districts have gotten back as a result of their projects?
I think,
Meaning, is it like, could we expect 5%, 10%, like a,
don't have numbers, but I can tell you colloquially, look at East Providence High School. East Providence High, people send their kids to East Providence from all over the state now. I can tell you that 5 million, close to 5 million number is incredibly high. Pawtucket is 7 million, and they're 3 times the size of you guys. That's a large number.
Chris, and I just like to piggyback on what you said, talking about getting people back. I think it's very important that we have athletic facilities that are parallel to what we're doing with the building, because I think that's a big part of why people would come back. Not the whole reason, but athletic facilities, the theater, all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
That's just my 2 cents.
And I'm going to throw the nightmare out there, and if we do nothing and all this work, goes to waste, then that number is going to be 6-7 million within 2 years. We're going to lose lots more students.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, so the item, the agenda item is review, discuss, and recommend action. As far as recommending any sort of action at this point, it's got to go to the town council. It's for them to act on. I believe, Luke, you said there's already a placeholder on the town council agenda for September 11th.
There is, and Jim's going to give a little context in his town manager report, and then, we expect that Chris and Phil will be there to give them a debrief on exactly, pretty much what you're seeing here, answer some questions, and the core question to be answered is, do you want to move forward with the current referendum as stated? I will say, too, I think one thing that needs to be stated in that meeting and reiterated is, this is an authorization to go up to 150 million, right? So that doesn't mean we have to spend. If it's less, it can be less. Right now, we're just talking about getting that authorization, and those bonds will be issued subsequent to that once approved. We just want to be clear in process on that. But yes, that is, so the recommended action, I think, for tonight from the building committee is if we want to just refer this to the town council for informational purposes and action by them.
Do we want to make let me rephrase that. I will accept a motion on that agenda item for a recommended action.
Yeah, so I'll move to recommend the council for further action based on the presentation by Left Field.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes. Yeah, right. Item 7 on the agenda is update regarding architect and construction manager RFPs and other updates. Just kind of a look, just looking for an update and status as to where that stands. Has it gone out? Has it, what is the next steps for that?
Next step would be to release the RFP, but I think the real next step is to bring this matter to town council and to get a decision from them. Because when we put out the RFPs, we're going to be attaching budget values to them, looking for specific scopes of work. And I mean, they're ready to go. I just have to plug in a few new dates. They can be released within 24 hours if you guys giving me the all clear to release them. But we think at this point, it's prudent to have these discussions with town council to see what the path forward is. I mean, we do have a solution at $150 million to give you guys the project that you want, and it's up to them how they want to proceed with it.
Great, thank you. That brings us to item 8, our public comment. Anybody? We have a couple folks out there. If anybody wants to come up and speak? Mr. Beasley, come on up. It was locked. Sorry.
So I just caught the end of that conversation. I'm guessing that the OPM suggested that due to the cost of construction now, they're suggesting that we go to 150. Okay. So I just have one comment, actually, and it has to do with the whether or not we're going to try and build a net zero school. I sent an email today to Mr. Carreno asking them if any of the projects that they've seen so far since it started, 2018, if any of the projects had been a LEED Platinum or a net zero school. I didn't get a response today, but I'm just going to guess that I'm going to guess that there haven't been too many, if any. So again, with today's global warming and being a coastal community, to me, we have to build as close as we can to a net zero high school. So having said that, one of the things that Studio J had presented to you a while back was a test well for a geothermal system. And Mr. Conte, when would that most likely be accomplished? Would that be done now, or after the stage 3 is started, or whenever? Stage 3. Okay. And our stage 2 is up there, right? Have we submitted it? Okay. That's it.
All right, nobody else from the community would like to speak. So this brings us to scheduling our next meeting. So this topic is going to go in front of the town council Monday, September 11th. After that, when do we want to regroup? The 14th is the following Thursday. I am personally unavailable. I could do another day. I could do it Wednesday, or we can move it out to the 21st, depending on the rest of the board's availability.
It's really up to the committee. We'll have feedback on Monday night. I'm sure there'll be discussion. So it's a matter of whether we want to reconvene to to have a follow-up based on what the discussion is among the council and whether we feel that we can provide any additional feedback with Chris or want to let it lie longer. I think our next council meeting after that's the 25th, which is that Monday, so we could feasibly have it on the 21st. I would expect that, I've talked to Jim briefly about this, but this is likely going to deserve its own meeting and may include the school committee in this. So we haven't set anything up yet. We'll get more feedback from the council after the 11th. So if that's helpful at all.
So do we want to put a pause on our meetings until so the council is going to have their meeting on the 11th, and we're assuming that's specifically going to be about the referendum. And then after that, we need a special, the town council should have a special meeting specific to what to do besides that, right, to move forward. Would it be with this body, are we thinking, or?
I believe the council can certainly discuss it, and if they have some action they want to take on Monday, they could do that. It's just, I know that we have a packed agenda.
Yep.
And it's likely to turn into much more.
Correct.
And I think there's going to be a lot of questions that Chris is going to want to dig in on. What would be helpful if the council could provide some feedback to Chris on some of the pending questions they'd like to ask. And I think this goes to Chris and the team, that take notes and understand where the thinking is, so we can come back with thoughtful responses to every one of those questions to ensure that everyone has a chance to really synthesize the data and take action. So long story short is, I don't know when that meeting is going to occur.
Okay.
It could happen prior to the meeting on the 25th. It could happen after, so.
So we should, in theory, put a pin in it and say our next meeting is pending town council actions.
Maybe that's the best course of action.
Is the full board okay with that, or how do we, is there anybody who feels we should convene on our own besides that?
What, if we did, what would we do
Right.
at our meeting while we were still waiting for town council?
I mean, the only thing to do would be to suppose different scenarios, but we wouldn't have any, that would not bode well.
Yeah. If the council starts discussing, hey, we want to look at certain options and that ensues on Monday, then maybe we reconvene to say, okay, they've put it back on the committee, or if they have action, they might pitch something back to the committee and say, well, we want the committee to look at X.
Yep.
Then we can meet to convene and
Okay.
recommendations.
So we'll just say that at the moment, our next meeting is pending town council action and decisions going forward. Yeah, good with that?
Yeah, Kate, just be aware that if it winds up being like, because I know we're trying to stick with Thursdays, if it winds up being the 28th, that is our open house.
Okay.
So like a 4 o'clock meeting though, if we went that route again, that would work just fine because that starts at 6. But just to be aware of that.
Yep.
So we don't, that doesn't have to become an email chain situation.
Sure. Sure it will anyway, though. And I'll refer
tried.
to November instead of September. I know, I'm sorry. All right, does anybody have any other comments that they would like to share at this point? And once again, Dorald? Okay. Okay, yep. We just have a community member expressing that the town council agenda is not posted publicly yet, so we just need to get it up there.
I'll go downstairs and talk with.
Okay, perfect. All right, and just a final thanks, like I said, to Leftfield and to Phil for bringing this to our attention now, and so that we can take proper action, so that we aren't faced with a larger problem down the road. So I appreciate that. And with that, and that said, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Dave
Second the
Palazetti
motion.
moved. Luke, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 4:59. Thanks, everybody.